Well, it's been some months since the Pixel Fold release, and I kind of want to wrap things up and give my final thoughts on it. I've been putting this off because I'm still kind of torn on how much I actually like the device. Oh, and I also had to send the phone back for a replacement, which was like a whole thing, but I'll get into that in a bit. So yeah, 3+ months or so after release, let's wrap it up. So just straight away, for a first attempt at a folding phone, Google kind of nailed it.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God.
I've been using folding phones on and off since back around the Z Fold 2 from Samsung, so I've gotten to kind of see the best and worst of what's on offer, at least in the US market. And the form factor here is almost perfect. It kind of gives me Microsoft Surface Duo vibes if you remember that phone. My and pretty much everybody else's biggest knock against the Samsung foldables has always been that super narrow front screen. Yes, the giant inside screen is what you're buying them for, but the front screen should be just as usable for times when you don't want to open it up to reply to a text message, and the front screen on the Pixel Fold is excellent. It's plenty wide for writing text messages, emails, and browsing or using apps. Even watching movies and shows on it kind of works. Open the Fold up and the inside is also really nice. The crease is visible, as it is with pretty much any other folding phone right now, but in day-to-day use you don't really even notice it. Now the bezels do stand out, especially compared to the competition, but like the crease in the middle, they kind of fade away and you don't really pay attention to them the longer you use the phone. Having the bigger bezels inside does allow the inner camera to kind of be hidden in the bezel, so it kind of works. I still prefer the hidden underscreen camera on the Z Fold series, but this one's not bad. You also don't get the accidental touches when using the phone because the bezels kind of block that for you. On the back, I really like the matte finish glass, and it really does a pretty good job of not collecting fingerprints. And it's held up pretty well for 3 months. The camera bump is pretty large, but I like how they followed this sort of pixel-like aesthetic with the design. I've been using a case with mine, so it's still really clean, but a lot of people have reported that the camera bump will get scratched up pretty easily with that chrome finish, so it's something to keep in mind. The hinge is great, and it can pretty much hold the phone open at any angle that you would want. One weird thing to me is that it doesn't open all the way, and I don't know why, but this just bugs the crap out of me. You can open it completely flat, but you have to push it a little bit harder, and it just feels like it's going to crack every time I do it. I'm not sure if it was just a weird side effect of Google's design or what, but I kind of wish it would open flat without having to push it a little more than I'm comfortable with. The phone is super slim when closed and not very heavy, so it's really nice to not feel like you're carrying around a brick when you put it in your pocket. And being shorter and wider than the other folding phones we've seen really makes this one feel great and not too tall to use. I can't speak too much on long-term durability because this is the first folding phone that Google has put out, but mine has held up great so far with the case. But that doesn't mean it's still going to be going strong a year or two down the road. There was already a small batch of people reporting broken folds within like the first week, but luckily that doesn't seem to be the majority as that kind of quieted down since launch. But you can also look at some other phones that have been on the market longer, and there have been tons of cases where the internal screen protector has started separating. And if Samsung hasn't been able to completely solve this after like 5 attempts, I'll be surprised if Google doesn't have any issues as well further down the line. It is water resistant, which is great, but it doesn't have any dust resistance, so you still have to watch out for larger debris like dirt and sand getting in there. The software experience is also solid, but not super intuitive and kind of basic. Again, this is compared to all the other folding phones on the market. The phone is using Google's Tensor G2 chip, which is not the newest as the new Pixel 8 and 8 Pro will have the G3, but it's fast enough for pretty much anything you'd want to do. It does lag from time to time if you try to jump around from app to app though. I can cut them some slack given that it's a first-gen product, but the extent of what you can do with a larger display is kind of limited to opening 2 apps side by side or having a pop-up window. There's no true triple app support like you find on the Samsung foldables. Now all this is fine, and I honestly don't know many people who would even use 3 or 4 apps at a time, but it still feels pretty first gen. For example, you can't individually customize the outer and inner screens separately. Whatever you set up on either screen, like say app layout, will just be mirrored on the other screen. Again, not a huge deal, but it would be nice to see. Google's whole thing is kind of keeping Android bare bones, and while I like that on the Pixel phones, here it kind of works against them in the lack of customization available in the menus. Now most of this could be added eventually through software updates, and maybe it already has and I haven't noticed it, but something tells me it will just be introduced with the Pixel Fold 2 next year. Now speaking of apps, the different aspect ratios on the phone start to show up as you use the inner screen more, with apps not scaling correctly and you get the black bars on either side of the screen. Now you can usually just rotate the screen and the app will take advantage of the full size, but it gets kind of annoying having to do that over and over. This is really on the developers of the apps more than Google, but it also means it's up to them to fix the issue, and I'm not sure how long that will take or if they will even bother to do it at all. But you take all of that together and it's a good enough software experience that doesn't really wow you but gets the job done. I had high hopes for the battery as it packs a 4800 milliamp hour battery compared to the 4400 in the Samsung Fold, but it's been kind of disappointing. Google's Tensor chip isn't known for being the most efficient, and you can see it here as I was ending most of my days with a pretty low battery. It's hard to measure exactly as it's going to depend on how often you use that bigger inner screen, but it's definitely not a 2-day phone by any means. And recharging speeds are pretty slow at just 21 watts wired, as Google seems to be eternally stuck on slow charging. Even the new Pixel 8 and 8 Pro max out at 30 watts wired. It took a little over an hour and a half to go from 0 to full. You can also wirelessly charge at 7.5 watts, and that should take close to 2.5 hours to fill up. Now, one bright spot is the camera performance, and I think they're excellent. Now, I'm not surprised because it's Google. You get that same Google computational boost, and everything comes out great in point-and-shoot scenarios as well as low-light performance. It is a bit of a downgrade from the Pixel 7 Pro, which is a disappointment given the starting price, but I'd say it's still about 85 to 90% of what the 7 Pro offers. And it's not unheard of with foldables. Samsung does the same thing with their Fold series, having worse cameras than the S23 Ultra. But overall, it's a great triple camera system that has you covered with wide, ultra-wide, and telephoto lenses. A few other small things to note. The dual stereo system sounds really good, and you get really good wide separation with the speakers being so far apart. This phone also gets pretty hot in heavy use, which is exactly the same as all the other Pixel phones, so I'm thinking it's just a Tensor chip problem. And lastly, I actually had to send my original Fold back because there was a tiny scratch on the inside bezel when I opened the phone. I've never opened a brand new phone and found a scratch, but there it was. My pictures don't really do it justice, but Google support was actually really excellent in helping me get it swapped out for a brand new one, and the whole process only took a few days, so that's encouraging in case anyone runs into any issues with their Fold. So final thoughts. There's a lot to like here, and as I said earlier, Google really did a great job when you consider this is a whole new product launch for them. But would I recommend it? Well, that's a little more difficult. At $1,800, it's so much more expensive than anything else in their lineup and doesn't really do anything differently or necessarily better than, say, the Pixel 7 Pro. So you really are just paying for the ability to fold and unfold into that larger screen. And maybe that's worth the $900 markup to you. But for me, I think I'm going to give them a little more time to get the software sorted out and maybe refine the design a little bit. I'm a huge fan of foldables, and I'm really glad that they entered into the market, so we finally have a little more competition. And if anything, the Pixel Fold has me really excited to see what they do in the future of the folding space. But that's everything I've got for today, and I really appreciate you sticking around until the end. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or it helped in any way, and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.